Alrighty, we are recording. I am sitting here with my longtime friend, Miss Brietta.
Yes, hi. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate your time. Yeah, I know we've been chatting about this for a few weeks now, but I only started this podcast. Probably like 6 months ago, but I was like tweaking what I wanted to talk about, and kind of settled on talking about like American culture, American politics. But really geared towards, envisioning a better future for all of us, including the next generation, which, we all have different opinions and views and all that stuff. Yeah. But many of us want the same thing. So I usually start with I'm an advocate of lower gas prices, lower grocery prices, and lower crime rates.
Okay.
Depending on however we get there, that's up to people trading ideas. But one major part, which is why you're here today, is I want to tap into my network of professionals to get an understanding of various career choices, and kind of take that message and gear it towards, teenagers, young adults, people who decide, okay, do I want to go into the military? Do I want to go to college? Do I want to be a nurse, a lawyer?
There's so many options.
Totally, yeah. And people change careers too, but all I can do, or at least all I can control, is hearing from a diverse realm of careers, and do you like the job, do you not like the job, and everything in between. So I appreciate you joining.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's a great idea because you can research all you want, but hearing it directly from somebody, that's where you're getting the meat of it, right? So I like the idea. It's cool.
Yeah, and the past few that I've done, so I did one with my brother-in-law who works in big tech.
Okay. Have I met him?
You may have met him maybe once.
Maybe.
I don't know.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, and then I did one with my friend who's a public defender. I did one with my friend who was in the military for about 20 years.
Okay.
So I'm really just literally trying to get all sorts of careers.
Yeah.
And you're in the realm of real estate.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Okay. What is that? What is that like?
What does it even mean?
Well, yeah, because real estate's such a broad,
it is so broad
term. So what do you do as a career, and what's the good, the bad, and the ugly with it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because it is so broad, and people, even when I specify realtor, I help people buy and sell homes. Even then, it's not common knowledge. It's actually not common sense, all the things that at least I was raised to know, and I think what most people were raised to know about real estate, it's not really what it looks like. So there's really two sides of what I do for work. There's the side of knowing just all the knowledge, ins and outs of contracts that go into purchasing or selling a home, which also includes knowing areas, just ins and outs of just the knowledge piece. But it's also, realtors are entrepreneurs. They're independently contracted. You don't get employed by someone who's giving you a paycheck every month or every other week. Doesn't look like that. So there's also this huge chunk aside from the knowledge of, do I know how to build my own business, run my own business? So that's the very zoomed out big picture of two sides: contracts, knowledge, what goes into buying a house, and then as well as running my own business. So do you want me to dive deeper into one of those?
Yeah, because it sounds like the people that you work with the most are people looking to sell their home, and then also people looking to buy a home, right?
Yeah, so I'm newer in the business, which typically newer agents work with buyers more often, just because someone who's already, if they're looking to sell their home, they obviously bought it originally, and they probably already have an agent that is someone they've worked with before, someone they trust. There's a few factors of why it works out that way, but I would say that's one of the bigger ones.
It's a long-term commitment. Yeah, you'd almost expect that you have someone on the books for that.
Yeah, once you've worked with them already on your first purchase. So I actually work with more buyers, but someone in my position works with both. It just would depend on kind of your network and where your clients are coming from.
Is there a part that you like more than other parts? Because as you know, I've been in sales for the past 5 years. There's awesome parts about it, and there's really shitty parts about it. Yeah. It's a net positive. That's why I stay in the career and I love my job. But what is that like for you?
Yeah, the goods and bads. I guess the toughest part, well, here's the thing. I love learning. So when it is tough, I'm like, okay, I'm just new, so I need to figure this out. But nothing's handed to you. And I think a lot of people don't understand that you have to hustle for every single bit of business that you're going to get. No one's handing you a lead or handing you a buyer, because why wouldn't they just help that person out, you know? Yeah. So hardest part is just generating the business in the first place, as well as, you know, you need to be able to work with a variety of people and to adapt to their style of communication, because you're going to get like all types of people buy houses. You know, it's not just a certain type of person that you're going to click with every time, but pivoting and adapting to what they need and how they like to communicate or receive feedback. Because in most of the scenarios, most of the contracts we're writing or discussions that we're having, I am the expert and I know more than they do. But you can't just come up and say, no, you're wrong, I know more than you, let me tell you. Yeah, it's more so, let's cater to what this person's beliefs are and be a human and be authentic and kind of have that back and forth on both sides.
Yeah.
But
that's like most sales in general too.
Yeah, it is.
Like even in, you know, I just interviewed David last week, and he's in a very similar role to myself. We both sell software. His role is a little more technical than mine, but it's like, you know, sales 101, you're not just telling someone why they should buy something. Yeah. You're trying to get an understanding of what they actually need and what their criteria is, and is that a good fit or not? Because I'm sure you run into people where it's like, okay, probably not worth me spending additional time on this person. Maybe there's other lower hanging fruit, more interested buyers to spend your limited hours on, right?
Yeah, definitely. And it's, I mean, part of the reason that I'm even in the business is because of the investment potential that there is. So I love working with people who view it that way. A lot of Americans, I think, view buying a home as just like the next thing to do, or like, oh, you're just supposed to purchase a home at some point in your life. And that part is where it actually is tougher for me, because I don't know if that has logic to it. Oh, it's just the next thing you're supposed to do. But I like people to dig deeper and understand why purchasing a home might be more valuable to them than renting. So then the fun conversations happen when there's investment-minded people who, they first meeting with me, they're like, I know that I'm going to build a lot of equity. I'm going to have a ton more money just a few years from now, and I can leverage my first home to get into something bigger, whatever version of that story. And that piece is always fun because, you know, then people come inspired and they know there's direction with it. And I enjoyed that side of it a lot more.
Yeah. I mean, some people in general, like outside of work, are easier to be around than others, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm, you know, even again in my position, like sometimes I work with potential buyers who are more educated and some that really have absolutely no idea. They just know that they have a problem and they need to solve it. You know, a little different than real estate, but it's that same concept of like meeting your customers where they are, right? Yeah,
it's the same concept. And so that's kind of the building your own business, you know, adapting to your environment side. And then that's the majority of sales, is that building a business and connecting with your clients. Whereas there's the whole other side that people seem to care about a little bit less, where it's the actual knowledge of the contracts. Like, how much do you know? How much experience do you have? How much are you invested in what's actually happening in the housing market this week, let alone last month? Things looked very different. And like some people say, like having your finger on the pulse of the market. So it's two very different sides, but that are both very important for building a business in real estate, you know?
Yeah. Well, and I like what you said about the fact that things last month don't look like they do today, right? Because even, I mean, we all want to buy a home. It's freaking insane in California, right? It's pretty expensive. But I also know people who, more millennial age, who right in the 09, 08 crash, I mean, homes were cheap, you know what I mean? So a lot of people were either investing in more homes, or they got a down payment on a home at that time and they still have it today. Yeah. But so it's interesting that, you know, things do drastically change like that, and probably a lot after COVID, I would imagine.
Yeah. I mean, during COVID was when we saw people say the unicorn years, where interest rates were like 2-3%. And not to get too technical about interest rates, but
the boring stuff.
I know, right?
Yet important.
Yeah. But we call them the unicorn years because we'd never seen rates that low. But then people start to have that expectation of, okay, like that's what I want to wait for. I want to wait till they're that low, when maybe that's not realistic. So having someone who, I mean, being the expert in the field who pays attention to those sort of things and can coach you through why it still makes sense when they're higher, or how to strategize and pivot on what your plans are for purchasing a home when it's higher. So that's where all the data and the more boring stuff and just the knowledge that you may never speak to your clients about it, but in order to be a good advisor and like you're representative as an agent, you're representing that person in a transaction that they didn't get all this education about. You just have to hold that knowledge even if they never ask you to be able to coach them through it, you know?
Yeah, and it's kind of a high risk situation because you're spending a lot of money.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to spend a lot of money on a home, I want to make sure I'm, checking all my boxes and dealing with someone who knows their shit.
Yeah, and that's kind of the role that you play as an agent is I'm the one who knows my shit. I'm the one who's going to give you the list of the boxes, or at least I have the list for you of boxes that we need to check, whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
And so that you don't have to go you could represent yourself technically, but you're not the expert, right? So
Yeah.
yeah.
That makes sense. And you mentioned that because I always like to get a good idea of like, there's a lot of awesome stuff that sounds about about real estate that sounds very attractive. A lot of people get into it like that.
Yeah.
You mentioned some of the more like difficult parts are building business, basically recurring business, enough people to talk to, enough opportunities to try to close, right?
Yeah.
Which is the same thing as my career, right?
Yeah.
And I know that at least early off, like it was a lot of grunt work where I was doing 100 cold calls a day, cold emails, F you, get off the phone, type of stuff.
Totally.
And you deal with it and you build thicker skin.
Yeah.
Would you say that you went through like a similar kind of,
Yeah, so I didn't take the cold calling route, and who knows, maybe I'll go back and still do that. There's a variety of ways to go about it. It's generally called lead generation, and you could approach that sort of any way. It could be calling people, sitting at a desk and doing 100, maybe 200 calls in a day. You'll hear professionals in the real estate world talk about choosing maybe 2, maybe 3 pillars or avenues of lead generation and running full force with that.
Like diversifying your
actually,
methods, right?
I would actually say narrowing down. Okay. So there's 7 different options that you could go with, whether that's holding open houses, making phone calls, door knocking. Guerrilla marketing is one of my favorites, like holding a...
I like that.
Have you heard
term.
of that?
I have, yeah.
Where you're basically meeting a lot of people at the same time so that you can be a human and put the face to a name. So just examples, but the idea is choosing 2 or 3 that you're going to go hard at and that you're actually going to spend the time and invest your energy into it, because you could do 100 calls every day for a week if you chose cold calling, and you might have 0 leads. No one is biting. No one is giving you the time of day. And if you're going to commit to that, like for those 7 days to be worth it, you need to do that, I don't know, maybe 6 months, maybe 12 months before you're going to see, oh, wait, there's people that are starting to respond, or they're coming back after I've called them 10 times in the last 2 months, So choosing a couple of those and running full force. I didn't choose cold calling. I decided to do mostly open houses and then more so just exposure to meeting new people. So I still have my personal training business, and I still work at Orange Theory. And the reason I'm keeping those hours is so that I'm in front of people every day where I can say, hey, if you have questions about buying or selling a house or just in general about real estate, let me know. I've got you. And I have clients that have come from that.
Yeah. It's a great opportunity to hand out business cards.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And to just meet people who know, like, and trust you. Like, that's sales, right? And they know you as a human. They like you because they're comfortable with you. And then they trust you, meaning like whatever depth that they've gotten to know you, they can put some of that trust in you, right? So definitely a hurdle, regardless of which avenue you take. You're not just getting leads right away. I've been licensed for a year. I've only been hustling for maybe 6 months. And I'm finally starting to see some return of just being in front of people, period. Whether it's on the phone or open houses, it's being in front of people. They know who you are. They know they can approach you and feel comfortable with that. So it's definitely slow starting.
I mean, like any career, I mean, whether you're sales or even like a tattoo artist, like it's going to take time for people to follow you on Instagram, for people to be like, oh yeah, his work's improving, or he's been doing this for a few years now.
But you're about it.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, and I sent you the video, but I did an interview with Adriana, right? Who, she's she's a professional female athlete, right? And it's like, the book I always reference that I was talking to her a bunch about was it's called How Champions Think.
Okay.
So it's a sports psychologist who basically analyzes top tier athletes and top tier business folk, and a lot of them have the same common denominators between them. So it's usually like, hey, you're gonna have to be okay with failing.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to be okay with getting the grunt work done in the beginning, and like, building your thick skin and learning what it's like to, go through like tough times. But once you persevere through that and push through that, like you start to get an idea of like, okay, I'm going to focus my efforts here. Okay, I know that, these types of activities will pay off, and I'm learning along the way. So it's like literally any career, you have to fucking learn how to fail, and you have to work hard to get better at it.
Yeah, you have to be new.
Yeah.
That's the speech I give to myself, but
In
also
the mirror every morning. Yeah.
And that's going to be, at least me personally, I hope that that's the case through a lot of life, that there's new things coming in, there's learning opportunities. But yeah, teaching yourself that, okay, I get to be new, I get to fail. That's the whole concept of learning, right? That you don't know yet.
Yeah.
You don't know yet. You have to get there. You have to put in the time and the practice. And a lot of people, you kind of mentioned this earlier, in specifics to real estate, people view it as, ooh, quick money, but it's maybe you're making a lot after the ton of hours that you put in to learn, just like you would have with any other career. You know, it feels like a lot of different entrepreneurial careers sort of even out in that sense of like, choose what you actually want to hustle and work your ass off for, and then be willing to be new for quite a while in it. Right.
Yeah.
No matter what career that is, real estate's definitely one of those.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I forgot who I was talking to about this recently, but like one of the major reasons I got into sales is because I knew that if I want to make more money, I can work harder and make more money. It's more commission oriented, right? Versus like, I've had jobs before where you could be working twice as hard as the person next to you. They're just kind of screwing around, but you're getting paid the same amount per hour, which, to each their own on that. That was just something that didn't fit with my personality and strengths. So like, I'm a big advocate, especially for young adults, like, if you don't know what the F you want to do, like go get a sales job. Like you will learn the return on busting your butt and figuring out how to develop thick skin.
Yeah. And I mean, some people love the idea of, I know how much money I'm getting this month. I know what the expectations are of me, and I don't want to have to think about whether I'm working harder or not. And there's jobs that fit that.
Yeah.
But if that's not your mindset, then it's sales of some kind, because all entrepreneur mindset people, it's all sales of some sort, because you're selling something, even if it's like coaching.
Yeah.
Even what would you call it? Just life coaching or different online courses, variety of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm like a big Jordan Peterson guy. He's like a psychologist.
Okay.
Some people know him, some people don't.
Probably seen like TikToks
probably seen his face. He's kind of controversial with some people, but I like psychology, whatever. But he always refers to an example of, like, let's say you want to go be a plumber, right? Awesome. Go be a plumber, go become a really, really good plumber.
Yeah.
And not only are you a good plumber after 10 years, but you know how to manage time, you know how to communicate with potential clients, you know how to, anything in between, manage finances, like, raise a family after that. So like me labeling my podcast the APE podcast, it's American Pursuit of Excellence. So Pursuit of Excellence, my philosophy is, if you're going to become an adult, pick something that you're going to try to get really, really good at. Even if it's being a plumber, tattoo artist, sales rep, freaking painter, basketball player, who cares? Like you will learn how to identify your own weaknesses and how to work on that, because everyone has their own strengths and weaknesses, right? But what shouldn't change is you working hard at it, and give it a couple years and you will literally see quite a bit of success.
Yeah, definitely. Tell me if this is sort of what you're touching on, but I don't know if it was a book or a podcast recently just describing the idea of go narrow and deep versus going broad and shallow, or like broad and thin. Like we've heard the saying, spreading yourself too thin, because you're putting energy into so many different buckets, but all your buckets are kind of like not that great.
Totally.
Is that kind of the similar concept to what you're describing?
I would say so, yeah. I mean, I totally agree with that phrase. And I've met a lot of people who are looking for purpose, looking for what they want to do in life. And very commonly hear feedback that, well, I know that I like this, I know I like that, I know I like that. I'm scared if I go hard on option one,
That'll
that
be
after a
wrong.
year I'm going to be wrong, and I wasted a year of my life. And
Yeah.
it's a totally understandable fear that I think humans have in general, but
Yeah.
it doesn't change the fact that like you have to pick one of those areas to go deep on.
Yeah.
And if after a year you're like, oh shit, I'm not going to be a pro basketball player. Well, at least you learned how to improve, certain skill sets, your
Yeah.
cardio, all that type of stuff. So I totally get that.
I like what you're touching on about that whatever amount of time you spent on it, you're learning something, not just that skill. Like you're learning time management is a very easy example.
Learn about yourself.
Yeah, about yourself, as well as at least some aspects of building that business. Even if you completely pivot and work on something else. I mean, it's been a year for me, and even now, let alone a year from now, if I decided like screw real estate, I want to do something else, I know so much more about building a business that this isn't a waste of time. It's not my plan. I think I found something I love.
Yeah.
But I like that perspective is valuable because you can apply it to other stuff.
Yeah, and it's the right mentality, in my opinion, because, like, as you know, before I even started the podcast idea, like, I'm a normal working class man, right? I have a job, I have my responsibilities, I have my own problems, right? Which everyone does, but I was looking for a creative outlet to spend my time on and something to get good at, right? And I was like, I'm not really into painting. I'm not really into anything like that. I always like tattoos, and I've been getting tattoos for years. I see a lot of these guys who come from literally nothing, work their butts off, learn how to fail, and all of a sudden they're making a ton of money, right?
Yeah.
And they have their own book of business.
Yeah.
So for me, I was like, okay, that sounds kind of interesting. Like, I like tattoos. I started to, okay, well, if I were to teach myself how to do that, what does that take? Okay, well, you have to have, a machine. You have to have fake skin to practice on, unless you're going to go practice on, some random person.
Yeah.
I mean, hey, if someone will do it. And I did it for about a year before, kind of transitioning to like the podcast. But in that process alone, like my, day one to, the end of the year was massive improvement, right?
Yeah.
And it was something where it's like, okay, wow, like I can adopt a random skill or trait or something that you like, of course, makes it a little easier, but you can teach yourself a brand new skill from the ground up and make a living out of it.
Yeah.
And like, so, although I enjoy doing the tattooing, it's more of kind of like a side fun thing now. I'm more focused on like the podcast. I think I can provide a more positive influence on society if I'm doing that.
Yeah.
I mean, versus, tattooing's great too, but like, I just think I can talk to more people, learn more stuff, just check more boxes.
Is that what tipped the scales for you?
It was,
impact?
Yeah, it was part of yeah, exactly. Yeah. Cause I almost like gave myself the opportunity to, see success in something completely brand new.
Yeah.
Like, although I knew about tattoos and all that, it was like never freaking, So I was learning. I'm not even a great, painter or drawer. You know what I mean? But seeing the amount of improvement I was able to pick up in just dedicating like hours per week to doing that, and on the weekend, like I was, proud of myself. One, but also like, wow, okay, other people can do this too. Other people can learn how to, play basketball or whatever. Like, just identify a plan and stay consistent at it, and you'll be surprised what you can do after a year or more,
Seriously, that's why, and I said this comment already, but something clicked this year in just pursuing something that I didn't know anything about a year ago. Just the concept of learning. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
You just described what learning is, that you didn't do it before, and then you saw improvement because you dedicated yourself to just practicing, experimenting, maybe researching, variety of
YouTube.
stuff. It's learning. Do we forget that that's a concept?
Yeah. Some people, honestly.
No, we really do. I mean, me too. I'm like, I realized that throughout this year. Oh, I can just learn this.
Yeah.
If I think I suck at it, okay, great. Let's learn it. Let's practice it. And I just was making fun of myself a few weeks ago, maybe a few months ago, realizing, oh, that's just learning.
Yeah. Well, that's what's cool too, because, our generation compared to our parents, like we have fucking YouTube. You can learn how to tattoo on YouTube and literally build a awesome career out of that, after time and practice. And something that I'm like my number one piece of advice for all young adults that I talk to, whatever you want to get good at, even if it's getting buff, let's say, find a mentor. Because, and I'm a big advocate, find a mentor who is a little bit older than you because they just went through what you're going through. Hey, you want to be a nurse? Okay, how do you freaking apply to be a nurse? Do you need a certain degree for that?
Yeah.
Are there some, okay, you have a bad GPA, is it a waste of time? Things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then also find a mentor who's like 30 years, 20 years older than you because they're like, okay, I've been in the industry. I know what the heck I'm talking about. And I've seen enough success stories and failure stories to where I can offer wisdom to that young adult, and hopefully they can avoid some misery by exactly, yeah. But so YouTube, great, but also find a mentor. And there's mentors on YouTube, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, definitely. Mentorship is huge. I've heard something similar where it was look for someone who's just ahead of you, but they're kind of within reach, that you're like, I could be there soon, but they know more than me. And then look for someone who's like, I could duplicate, if I could duplicate your life, that's what I want to do, Yeah,
there's a UFC fighter, he's retired now, but it's Shamrock, I don't know if you've ever heard him.
Maybe.
He was like, some people know him, but he has a motto. I think he calls it like plus and minus. And the plus represents someone who's a little bit better than you.
Yeah.
And he's like sparring with these people, jujitsu, like boxing, all this stuff. And he's like, losing because the person's better than him.
Totally.
And then find a negative, someone who's a little bit worse than you at that. Now you're able to, beat this person in the boxing match, whatever.
Practice your skills.
Yeah. And you're also like for me, in my first few years of sales, like I was trying to figure out, still trying to digest certain concepts that like, even though people were explaining it to me, it just didn't register until I figured it out myself. And then if now I have mentors or mentees underneath me who are just graduating college and like, hey, how the heck do I go work at this company or whatever? I'm like forced to explain that to the person who's a little bit behind me, which makes me better because now I'm like forced to articulate, okay, here's why you shouldn't spend your time on that. Here's why you should spend your time on this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, the mentee adds value to the mentor as well.
Yeah.
And it makes you reflect a little bit on, is the way I'm doing this actually efficient? Once you start explaining it, then you might start to see some of those little loopholes that, no, I could do this way better than I am, which is a valuable relationship. So I have a mentor in the real estate world. I would love to be in her position. She does great business. I also like the way she does business. But you do also see, I bring a fresh perspective. I'm younger than her. She'd probably hate that I just said that. But, bringing a fresh perspective of what actually we could do this a little more efficiently, which it's a great dynamic and healthy relationship to have, for both sides.
So I was going to ask too, which I'm trying to get in the habit of asking everyone I interview, but like, where do you, in your career, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Like, and you're doing everything right. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
In 5 years, I see myself, this is kind of broad, but as the investor. And I mean, that's why I started in this career anyways, is because I know how valuable real estate is from an investment mindset. And eventually I want to be the one that's on that investment side, meaning I own several properties and they're somehow generating income. Majority, that play is going to be an equity play. You're going to make more money by the value of that home going up, but also, putting renters or Airbnb, variety of things like that, and leveraging those properties against each other to create more wealth, which eventually can turn into passive income. I mean, it's easier said than done. It's quite a game to play.
Yeah.
But
long-term game.
I imagine in 5 years I will be in that game. Yeah. Whereas right now I don't own any property.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a broad
answer.
I mean,
and that's a reasonable goal too, So I would imagine that, so you're saying that, like you want to get into a position where you own the home yourself and either you're finding candidates to rent that home to cover the monthly payments or mortgage, and then probably sell some, buy some. I mean, is that a wise thing to do? Because I know some people who own multiple properties. I mean, they're like 80 years old, but like they own multiple properties. They don't necessarily sell them. They just like look for renters. Is that something that you envision, or?
There's a variety of avenues that you could take. My vision is more so, and there's variety steps to get there. This isn't just
there's no silver bullet,
but I would like to own multiple. And the way that the money moves, you can leverage, whether it's your debt or your equity that you have in one, or if it is full of renters, that income can be calculated into how much you could afford on another home. So there's ways that through appraisals or through the lending process that you can own one, still have that debt on that property. It's not that it has to be paid off, and get a mortgage for a second property. And maybe you're living in one and renting out the other. Maybe you find a way to rent both. Um, this is kind of a jumbled answer of that I would hope to own multiple, rent out some, probably live in at least one of them.
Yeah.
And it's really a game. You could compare it, I guess, to stocks of like deciding when to sell and when a deal is actually, that you are making money on that deal, the deal being the property.
Yeah.
Or when it's a good time to sell because maybe you don't have cash flow on it, and if you would actually do better to free up that capital and put it into a better property that's going to have a higher cash flow compared to what money's just sitting in there. So it's quite like a balancing game, and there's many avenues to take. So I guess I'm not sure exactly which avenue will be my favorite. I think it'll depend what deals are presenting themselves at the time and the market that I'm jumping into, which is part of why I even have the career, because I want to know and understand the markets to see where exactly are the best deals for which type of investor. Is that sort of making sense, or is that too broad?
No, it does make sense. And I think it ties back to what we were talking about earlier, where it's like you have to know the nitty gritty details, and you have to, like to not only be a sufficient consultant to your customers,
Totally.
but also to map out what are the next 1, 3, and 10 years going to look like for your own career.
Yeah,
right?
definitely. And for them, because I have clients who of course they want to live in a beautiful home, but majority of the reason is the investment. And so for me to coach them, first steps and 5 years from now, what we're going to be doing then, or if we can do that within 2 years, then we will, but leading them through that process, because that's exactly what I want to do with the capital that I'm building up.
Yeah. I mean, you're working smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
And I think what's important, like, again, doesn't matter your career or even your lifestyle, you should be aiming upward.
Yeah.
So long as you're like, hey, I'm good with this, like, that you want to improve, that you want to own one house, then multiple, then, get to a point where you're fucking, real estate mogul.
Yeah.
But it's important that you're aiming upward. And I think the beauty of it is too, is like, let's say in a year from now, you can reassess, what I mean? Like you can determine if you still want to go down that path, or if you know more about your own strengths, weaknesses, whatever, and determine that you're going to go down path B instead. And that's all acceptable and totally normal for humans.
Yeah.
Right?
Totally. And I gave myself permission already that in 2 years into the business, 3 years into the business, I might change my mind slightly on that. Mm-hmm. And being the investor is its own business, whereas being the agent is a different stream of income. Like they would be two separate streams. Mm-hmm. So who knows if I'll stay heavy on the agent side or if I'll be more heavy on the investor. You're right, it could pivot. That's going to be determined by so many factors that I feel positive about, but I don't know yet.
You're taking the right steps because, like I said, even if you're trying to be a plumber, get good at that, skill set, and you're getting good at the industry of real estate and how that back and forth processes work. So long as you are growing in that field of knowledge, like you will make better decisions and continue to grow, like inevitably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the plan so far. I'm so bad at answering the 5 years question.
Oh,
or the 10 years question because I'm like, well.
Yeah, like you won't know, but you know that you can reassess after a year or so. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because again, like a lot of the people that like I'm trying to talk to and inspire are people turning 18. They're like, okay, do I want to go to college? Or even I know a lot of people that got through their bachelor degree and they have absolutely no idea what they want to do, which is completely normal. So long as they understand that it's okay to fail and that it's okay to change your mind and it's okay to pivot and all that stuff is inevitable. And a lot of times the pivoting is for the better, right? You're redirecting yourself towards something that's going to more align with your values or your strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah. And you're right that the pivoting point is so valuable because if you could never pivot, you'd adapt, sure. But that just means, you learn something and you know that you need to turn to get towards that better direction. What was I about to say? That's fine.
Yeah, I think we got it. I guess so. Taking a step back from your real estate career,
yeah,
like we've known each other since like early high school, I guess.
Early high
I don't even know.
school.
Maybe middle school. I'm not sure. I mean, because I know
Maybe
Jed.
middle
I've known Jed
school.
since your brother, like since high school.
Were you
So.
a Matrix kid?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Ben since Matrix,
Okay,
for sure. Because
so yeah.
I think some of the teams knew each other.
I think so, yeah. But
Yeah.
but ever since I knew you, you've been like really dialed into like sports and now fitness. Maybe you probably were back then too, but
Yeah.
that's something that I see with a lot of successful people. They take care of themselves.
Yeah.
You clearly take care of yourself. Like, has that been something that you've always enjoyed doing? Did like your parents force you to do sports and you ended up loving it, or how did all that come about?
I got put in sports from a young age.
Kind of like every kid, actually. Huh?
Yeah. Yeah, I heard AD say too, everyone gets put into soccer.
Yeah.
And I got put into soccer. I've watched my siblings because I'm the baby.
Mhm.
And oh yeah, really? Yeah. Okay. And from watching them, I just already loved it. So never forced, but I definitely, when you're 6, are you making that decision? No.
True. But you enjoyed it enough to play in high school, at least soccer, and you were doing like hardcore track, right?
I was doing track as well. Yeah, and that was all of my own decision. Like I asked for extra training, and my parents were supportive in that, both in track and soccer.
Mm-hmm.
I got training outside of teams that I was on, and I asked to stop playing rec and to start playing club, stuff like that. And then so that was all. I loved it the whole time. And then in college, I was like, okay, I don't think I care enough to show up at 6 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's when it pivoted to weightlifting
Gotcha.
and fitness. That was it was fun. It was social. I was good at it naturally. And I liked being in shape. It was something to work towards, I guess, to get stronger. And that's how it started out. Then eventually it turned into, I can make money off of this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably where the entrepreneur mindset came in. I just realized I could leverage the skills I already had.
And that's like through running like a social media account, getting awareness that you have best practices for lifting, form, health, all that stuff, right?
Yeah. So I guess it actually started in the gym that I would have women come up to me and maybe ask questions. Or that I had a lot of trainer friends in the gym and we would just collaborate on different things or do workouts together. Mm-hmm. And I just realized that I had value to provide. Mm-hmm. And it didn't start with social media. Social media was after COVID. I started training right before and during COVID.
Okay.
But yeah, I think that's what sparked my entrepreneurship. I was like, I can provide value here and I can be in control of where I put this time and how much I charge people. Mm-hmm. Aspects like that, and just honing in my own skills.
Is it like a diet recommendations too? Like, hey, avoid these foods, or is it purely like, form and reps and all that stuff?
Yeah, more so form and programming of the workout. And honestly, at the end of the day, people want accountability. They want you to stand there and make sure they do it.
Yeah. Because a lot of people need it too. You know what I mean?
We all need it. Are you kidding? I even wrote myself a workout last night. And I went and I did maybe like 2 or 3 out of the 6 things I wrote that I was going to do. And, you could go into a variety of reasons of why, but we all need some accountability, especially in certain categories of our life that maybe aren't the top priority at that time. So you pay someone else to do it for you, and you're not going to slack because you just paid them to stand there and watch you do it.
Yeah.
But I don't usually dabble in nutrition just because that's not where my knowledge base is.
Yeah.
But of course, recommendations and asking people the question can help hold them more accountable to it too.
That makes sense. Because I feel like what was I getting at? When I talked to Josh Bell the other day, who like literally is probably the most.
Is that his life right now?
He's like the most OCD guy.
Okay.
I mean, I've known him since I was like 10. You know what I mean? And he's
too.
always been like oddly OCD, which pays off in many ways. Like the dude's huge. He's really rehearsed on like supplements, diet, how the body works, like all that stuff. I think he learned a lot working at like GNC, which you learn a lot of freaking stuff working there. But him and I were chatting about how just like finding that area, so finding something you like, and then figuring out how to get disciplined on it. Because like even me, like a couple years out of college, I didn't really care about discipline. It was like I play soccer, that gets my cardio.
Yeah.
I don't even really need to eat healthy. I can drink, I can do whatever. Until like almost like the older you get, you're like, oh shit, okay, I actually kind of feel crappy in the morning if I'm like not eating well or if I didn't get enough cardio. So like, okay, although it's not the most fun stuff, I force myself to drink enough water, to get enough cardio, and then all of a sudden I'm operating better at work,
Yeah.
and I'm communicating better, and it's like oh
Yeah.
wow, I'm seeing the benefit of it.
Definitely. Yeah, I would say, you know, from being in sports, then it turning to fitness, it's trickled into every other area where it's that discipline or self betterment, the pursuit of excellence. I think that yeah, that it's kind of, it shows up in all areas of your life, which is a good thing. That means you're actually working on the deeper levels of it. It starts to show up in categories, not just you're eating perfectly and you're going to the gym every day, but that you're pursuing better, right?
It's like a growth mindset, which
Yeah.
you can find a ton of videos online about growth mindset versus fixed mindset, but it makes sense. You know what I mean? Like there are some things that you can't control, right?
Yeah.
I always bring that up. Like I'm a big stoicism guy, which is like
Okay.
control your controllables.
Yeah.
And like I think we've all been there where you're like sitting in traffic, like angry. You know what I mean? And it's like, well,
that energy's going nowhere.
exactly. It's like you're only burning your energy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's like just thinking about things in that way, where it's like, okay, some things I can control and should control, and some things are completely out of my control. So like just balancing that almost is like that next level of adulthood, huh?
Yeah, and that's being real with yourself, I think, because you want to know where your energy is going, and if it's going into a place that it's not making any impact, I mean, think of it like money. Since we put so much weight on the value of money, but what about the value of your energy? If it was money that you were like throwing out the window in traffic to try to get the cars to move, is it going to do any good? No, if anything, the cars are going to stop even more because they're going to say, hey, this guy's throwing cash, let's go get it. Like,
and you have less money now.
And now you have less money.
Yeah.
So it's just being real with yourself, checking yourself in that sense and saying, okay, how can I be more productive here? Or treat myself better by keeping this energy for where it's going to, do better for me. Right?
Yeah.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, I mean, it's totally like we've all done it. You know what I mean? We've all gone through it, and it really is a waste of time. So I think it's just one of those things where no one's perfect, and like growth mindset, just try to get better. If you're trying to get better, you will inevitably be like, okay, well, I can improve on my diet, I can improve on my nurturing relationships. You know what I mean? Like all this type of stuff that I think brings balance to people's lives. And I don't know, like I know people who again like completely like they get so zoned into a project at work or something that they completely neglect their health. And they're wondering why they're so stressed. They're wondering why they like their patience is less than before, all that type of stuff. So I don't know. I think it's like, I like talking about it. I try to talk about it more. It kind of dips into like philosophy, wisdom, like all that type of stuff. But I forgot like one thing I wanted to talk to you about. So when I was talking to Jed the other day, like I'm not a religious person, but I am a fan of community organizers that try to teach morals and try to better, other people in the community and all that stuff. And I feel like your family was like always big on that since I've like known you guys. Like, is that something that like, do you feel like a lot of that like rubbed off on you? Not the religious part, but just like the trying to teach people. Because I feel like you're good at, you teach people real estate, you teach people fitness, you're a confident person. Like, do you like leading? Do you like,
Yeah, I hear what your question is. I mean, I agree the religion part isn't what rubbed off.
Yeah.
But I think maybe a posture of seeing beautiful and good things that impact my life and that inspire me and that I'm thankful for, and thinking, okay, other people should experience this too. And not that it's like selfless or anything righteous, but just like I know this is good, other people should know about this. And that's a very religious, like plain sentence of, because this is so good for me and that like I see so much value in it, I have to tell other people how good this is too.
Yeah.
And my mom and dad would totally relate to that sentence. So yeah, maybe that's part of what's rubbed off, but I still, as an adult, like reassessing beliefs that we just kind of were handed as kids. That might be one of them. That's one that I'm glad I have and that I choose purposely to keep. That, if I'm experiencing and learning things that I think are beautiful, I want to share that.
Yeah.
Like hopefully that's going to benefit someone else's life, whether I see it or not, it doesn't matter. But yeah. if I think it's good, right?
It makes sense to me. I mean, and it is fulfilling, you know. I think that's something that I've like, you know, gone through my own journey of like, okay, you know, again, I'm not a religious person, but I do believe that like some decisions and thought processes will be better for you than not.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to like just full blown jump into a random religion, but
Yeah.
I think it's good. Like I'm a big philosophy guy. There is philosophy in Christianity, Judaism, Islam, all that type, Buddhism, all that type of stuff. And I kind of feel like in this like neo era of Americans where we accept all people of all backgrounds and religions, and that's almost the beauty of it because you get to not necessarily pick and choose the good stuff from each of them, but you see these different lenses, which I think is just inevitably good for you in terms of like your mindset and stuff.
Yeah, you know? I think it's awesome. I think a variety of perspectives have so much to add. Mm. I mean, you can talk about right and wrong if you want, but I'd rather learn what I can from a variety of people. Maybe these two people completely disagree with each other, but I can learn something from both of them.
Yeah.
You know, and I think, yeah, you can pick and choose. You said not necessarily, but why not pick and choose when nobody, well, I guess this is my perspective, but nobody has the correct answer.
Yeah.
So.
And so long as you're doing good, like that's another Jordan Peterson thing. He's like, people ask him if he's religious, and he's like, well, I don't like answering that because it's kind of it means something totally different to everyone. Yeah. Like what religion,
it's a label.
Yeah, exactly. But he's like, all I care about is doing good. He's like, so if you act as if God exists and you're like not fucking killing people and like all this stuff, that's really all that matters. You don't have to be preaching.
Actions.
Exactly.
It's the results, which that's something I've been trying to implement in my business and in any like personal development as well. You can learn all you want. You can understand whether it's religion, sales, whatever. You can understand it, read it every day, but are there actions? Are you implementing? Is there any execution? Bottom line, I don't care how much you know. Are you carrying it out?
Yeah.
It applies to any topic, you know?
Yeah.
And that's like, it's huge. And you can listen to people argue. This is part of why I sometimes don't listen to people debate, is because I'm just thinking, okay, well, what are you doing about it? Where does that show up in your life? What actions are you taking? Is this conversation gonna carry forward to make a difference?
Yeah.
You know, which is part of kind of cool what you're doing with this too, of using conversation. So hopefully either inspire or give answers so that there's action, you know, so that people have more clarity of the action that they can take.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of it too. Cause like, again, if I'm talking to a mentee of mine about sales, like there are things I can recommend they do and things that they don't do, but they have to actually do it. You know what I mean? And that's a big, like I've had a ton of people do one 30-minute call with me and I never hear from them again. And then I have like one or two people that I've met that like text me all the time, ask me questions. I'm like, okay, I like this kid.
Yeah.
Like he's got the right energy. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And they see the value and want more of it.
Yeah.
You know,
and I'm very grateful for the mentors I've had that gave me the time of day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like a pay it forward kind of thing. I was talking to David about this, but it's like I can have it on my resume, like forever a mentor and forever a mentee. Because you always should be teaching and you always are learning. So, you know?
Yeah, definitely both sides of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you, so I guess like speaking of like, advice for, let's say, young Americans, you are a confident woman. Do you have like advice for young women specifically to, I know it's kind of a tough one, but I try to have like towards the end of the conversations I'm having is like, and we can take this however you want, but it's like, what would you envision for the next, what would you hope for the next 5 to 10 years for our society? Me personally, I would like a better economy. I'd like less crime. You know what I mean? I'd like happier people. I want myself to be happier. I want more money. Like those are reasonable things to want. And then also like, what advice would you have for the next generation, the people one generation under us, trying to learn from us and our mistakes as well as our accomplishments?
Yeah.
And I keep it broad on purpose because I just like to hear people's perspectives.
I mean, I just had 10 things pop into my head. There's so many problems.
Yeah. And it doesn't even have to be problems. It could be like what you hope for the future, like hopes and dreams. Yeah.
Hopes, for sure. Well, we touched on one of them about being new. I think, especially being younger, maybe being around 18, coming into the world, it's hard to remind yourself that you don't know everything. And when you see something that you're excited about or that you decide then that you want, like grabbing it and holding on to it as hard as you can. And I think some of the advice would be remembering that that's not the end of your life right there, and that there's going to be so much learning, and to not just accept that, but to kind of chase it, like to chase the learning and then maybe proving yourself wrong. And that's uncomfortable, but we don't want to have a comfortable life. I don't think so.
I don't think that's the North Star. I think the North Star is growth and growth and personal prosperity, not just pleasure. Because a lot of people just pursue pleasure, and it's like, oh, great, okay, well, I can pay my bills, and now I'm just going to sit around all day, which I'm not sure that will bring you, happiness.
Yeah. Then what? Yeah. And also, I guess that one of the solutions to having no idea what you want to do with your time or no idea what direction you want to go isn't to just say, well, something good will come my way. Mm-hmm. That's not the solution. The solution is to educate yourself, to ask questions, to surround yourself with people who know more than you do. Even if you're like, well, I don't want to be where that person is, but to see what you can learn from them, listen to their stories. Listening, actually, I take everything back I just said. Listening, asking questions and listening. I was never a listener until this year. I've learned what listening is, and it's like exponential growth from there.
It's like a humility thing, I think, as well. Like knowing that, as you said, like that you don't have all the answers. And almost the sooner you can accept that, it's kind of like ego related. Like Ego is the Enemy is a book I recommend to people. Enemy. Yeah, because you can take. The book details like throughout history the greatest of leaders, including Attila the Hun, let's say.
Okay.
Their ego got in their own way, and although these people are on the top of the world, they themselves were the reason for their own downfall. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's an ego thing. It doesn't matter if we're talking about 2023 or freaking year one. That doesn't matter. Like humans have fucking egos, and it gets in our way.
Yeah, definitely.
So I totally get that. Yeah.
And it's the step right past that too. Okay, you acknowledged you don't know everything. Now, what are you going to do about it? It's not just acknowledging it. That's the first step. Obviously, the first step is admitting it, and then acknowledging it.
Yeah.
That's right. Everyone knows that one. That's the first step. There is a step after that. That's like then you implementing it and finding out what you don't know. You can't just stop it. Well, I can admit I don't know everything. Yeah. Great. True. Now let's move forward with that. Right? People forget that piece.
And some things just come with wisdom too, because you could be really, really smart and have no wisdom, and that's gonna get in your way. You're gonna get in your own way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it sounds like young Americans, check your ego, although that could be difficult, but try to move towards that. Listen as best as you can. None of us have all the answers, and what's important is that we're soaking in ideas and making decisions for ourselves.
Yeah.
Any hopes and dreams for either local San Diego, America, the world in general? What would you say your hopes and dreams are for?
Two of the things I talk about are one, education. If I was supreme leader of the world, I'd change our education. Just because, that's a whole other route. But I think what's exciting, I guess something hopeful, is that we have so much access, like YouTube University.
Yeah.
We have access to so many things. And I'm seeing somewhat of a movement of, people diving back into like mental health and emotional health, which I think ties into really what matters to be educated on. So if that theme keeps growing, that's something I'd be hopeful for. I think it's exciting to see people diving into their mental and emotional health in a practical way. And then, I guess
that's a good one.
It's all learning. It's huge. Yeah. And that.
And you want the best for the kids. Like that. You like kind of unconsciously said that, but like you want better for the next generation, which not everyone agrees with. Sorry, sadly.
Yeah. There's only so much you can control. It's not that you can. Sometimes you do have to worry about your life and your reality. So it's not just about who's next. But one of the other things I say is like we need better dads. We also need better moms in the world, and then having that, we will raise better sons and we'll raise better daughters who then are going to become those better moms and dads. I don't know how to carry that out necessarily, but that's something that I see because, like, you can blame whoever in it, but it's like if each generation works on that, like, mental and emotional, just health, I guess is the end of that word, and collaborating on what that looks like. It's humility and it's listening, I think, are big pieces of it. But I think those are important. And create a better future.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with that. Like, I think we need better leaders, whether it's dads, moms, freaking teachers. We need
brothers, sisters.
Exactly. We need responsible citizens to say, okay, that's bullshit. Okay, that's probably a better idea.
It's authenticity too, like calling it out.
Yeah.
And saying like, I think you can do better than that.
And that's what's really gotten effed up in our society, I think, where I think people are just kind of scared to say what they think.
It's going to be canceled.
Well, exactly, yeah. And I mean, I've gone down the rabbit hole on that, and a lot of my videos, I mean, we can talk about that for days, but like, I think it's a serious problem. And it actually is historically early signs of society getting worse and worse, as in like the economy is going to get shittier, like not being able to collaborate, like, okay, those ideas we don't like, so we're going to cancel them. Like that doesn't matter. This could be in Africa, this could be in Asia, it doesn't matter. That's usually the beginning sign of like, okay, things are actually not, going so well. Yeah. And then what comes to follow is higher gas prices, higher prices, higher crime rates, all this type of stuff. So humans are cyclical. That's what I've learned. And what is important, what shouldn't change, is having good morals. Even if you're not religious, you should have a moral hierarchy. Some things are better than others. Yeah. You know what I mean? And then also we need responsible adults to take care of society and to contribute ideas. And that's really what I'm trying to do with like the podcast and like other people, and you share the same sentiment, but like that's why we're sitting down like, hey, I got my shit together. I'm by no means perfect. I've gone through my failures, but I want to share that to the next generation so that they can, buckle up and figure out what to do.
Yeah, and open the conversation.
Yeah.
Because, and tell me if this is along those same lines. I haven't thought about this before, but I guess the idea of you're not allowed to say certain things, that then you almost don't choose a standpoint and you're kind of okay with whatever. And then there's nobody who's being that driven, passionate person that says, no, we need to change this because they're too scared of being that opinionated. Is that kind of where that decline comes from?
Absolutely, yeah. It's tied into it for sure. I mean, of course it's a tricky...
then I'm with you.
Hey, that's all I care about, you know what I mean? Like I said, I have close mentors of mine that I would take a bullet for that completely disagree with my politics, let's say. But we want better for our society. We want better for the next generation of kids.
But that doesn't mean you have to agree to want better.
Exactly. What matters is we're talking.
That's interesting. I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, because if you can't be passionate about it and you're just like, let's all be happy, nothing gets done.
And then, nefarious forces come in and take advantage of people being so neutral and silent, sadly. And that's another kind of cyclical human problem.
This is interesting.
Oh, I could talk for hours about this stuff.
I like that a lot. I feel that I've had that maybe somewhere in my head, but I like putting words to it.
Yeah.
Describing that
Jordan
specifically. You think?
Yeah. I mean, I just like psychology in general. Like, I think we can learn a lot.
Oh, I do too.
With psychology, with philosophy, religion. I mean, like I said, all that stuff.
And I don't mind disagreeing with what someone's saying. Like, I would rather listen to it and maybe pick and choose, or at least learn from it. Even if, like, say it's controversial or it's something that is very taboo, even for me personally, I'm like, ew, don't say that.
Yeah.
But then it's still, I think it's good to listen and soak that in, because there's pieces that you're going to like.
Yeah, and that's the importance of freedom of speech in general, because, like, if someone's saying some crazy stuff, I'd rather know it than not know it. You know what I mean? It's like, hey, this guy's saying a bunch of, crazy, hateful stuff. Hey, you can say whatever you want. It's a free country, but I'm going to stay away from that individual. Yeah. And that's, I think, one of the main reasons we have freedom of speech is because, like, and same thing with, like, again, not to, talk about, like, humans in the past, but, like, certain authoritarian leaders in, like, communist countries, all throughout time, they censor voices that disagree with them.
Yeah.
And because they're like, well, no, that's considered hate speech. That's considered whatever. Let's censor that. Now all of a sudden people don't freaking know anything because they're like, oh, well, I thought this was the only way. Wait, there's another option? and that just creates a ton of problems in a lot of different ways.
Yeah. I was talking with a friend who has very strong beliefs. She doesn't impose them on other people, but she was in a very specific setting where some people were like, "Oh, is that an option?" She's like, "Yeah, just ask for the option. Mm-hmm. Hey, is that my only thing, or is there another way I can go about this?" And that people start to forget that they can ask those types of questions. I wonder what people would think. I'm going to be posting about this when I leave. Mm-hmm. But I wonder what, the general population would say to touching on the topic of, if we subdue everybody and no one's passionate about it, who's going to get things done? Mm-hmm. I want to know what some of I don't know what I call these people, but, there's a lot of forces in our society who are saying, like, you're not allowed to say that. You're not allowed to say that. You're wrong, you're crazy, you're mean, you're evil. What that type of person or group of people would say to this idea, because I'd expect they'd say, yeah, you make sense. We shouldn't.
So, one specific example would be, so like, let's say, I've made a video on it, but like transgenderism, you know what I mean? Which transgender people absolutely exist, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But but there are aspects of young, children who, whether they're not comfortable with their body for some reason, mm-hmm. They say, hey, they go to school and they're like, hey, call me by the other pronoun. And then usually they get a lot of social credit and like, mm-hmm. people are like, yeah, you go, all this stuff. Boom, they go from misfit kid to popular kid.
Okay.
And the problem is there is a wave of children who aren't transgender who will identify as transgender because they're getting all this, social clout, whatever. But they'll go through what they call gender affirming care, which is basically like, first step is puberty blockers. So if I'm biologically male and I'm like, hey, I'm actually a girl. Okay, great. The doctors, the therapists will say, okay, yeah, you need gender affirming care. Here, step one is puberty blockers. And you need all your pain and problems will go away once you fully transition. So it's a whole topic I've talked about. But getting back to what we were talking about is, as a parent, you would want to be aware of the potential dangers of your kid saying, "Hey, call me by the other pronoun," right? Like you would rather know than not.
How far that goes.
Yeah, and it's like, hey, you're accepting of your kid, whatever. But you also there are thousands of kids who completely regretted it because they were like, "Hey, I was going through a hard time." Maybe they were like sexually abused. Yeah, exactly. I mean,
I didn't know anything until this year. Yeah. Let alone 12 years old.
Yeah, and let alone deciding that you're going to hop on puberty blockers, which has irreversible damage to your body. Or sadly, some children are actually going through surgery to say, hey, I'm 13, but cut off my wang because because I identify as the other gender, whatever. So yes, there are actual people with gender dysphoria, but there are also a lot of children falling prey to like the social contagion is what they call it.
The children.
And where the censorship comes in is you have these social justice warriors is what I call them. But they'll read an article online of a parent saying, hey, my kid really regretted this, hey, here's what we were told, all this stuff. The social justice warriors will say, hey, that's transphobic. And then they'll want to censor that article.
Yeah.
So now parents are trying to research things and all of a sudden there's only pro-transition content online and they don't see enough parents or articles of parents saying, hey, be on the lookout. Here's kind of what my kid went through, all that type of stuff. So the social justice warriors think they're doing society a good thing by canceling hate content, hate crimes, hate, that's transphobic, that's hateful. We don't want that in society. So that's a good thing that we censor. But it's an age-old tale that humans go through for, again, thousands of years where it's like, we should censor that religion. We should censor that. It's like, you don't want to censor anything because
you need both sides.
Absolutely. And when you don't have that, people make the mistake of saying, oh, okay, well, hey, I guess this is a good idea for my kid. You know what I mean? So it's like some people, they think they're doing a good thing by censoring. Exactly. They think they're doing a good thing by censoring, but in reality, it's harmful. And there's a reason we don't want to censor. There's a reason we like freedom of speech and we like the free flow of ideas. Because if I have an insane idea, I want to say it out loud and then you can challenge me on it so we don't live out that bad idea. Do you know what I mean? Because that's way worse.
100%. That's a great way to say it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty insane. I mean, I'm making more videos on it. But
I
it's
guess I
like,
don't look into this stuff, but I'm with you for sure.
yeah. And what I've learned too is like I've had people very critical of me posting about that stuff, and then I've had people who are like, "Dude, hell yeah! Like, I'm really glad you did that." You know what I mean?
It's tough because okay, there's several moving pieces happening because you're giving your opinion based on the way you're talking about the topic of any sort of transgender or whatever. But your point is that, hey, this is the, I guess, more healthy way for a society to treat ideas and to treat disagreements. Mm. Within my house, in my life, I can choose which ones I agree with and disagree with. I'll carry that out on my own. But the bigger picture is, how are we as to create a healthy world gonna deal with the fact that we do disagree? I'm not saying I have the right way, but let's keep all of that on the table so that we don't, I don't know what the end result would be if we keep going down that trajectory, but diminishing ideas, that does sound scary. That sounds like so many more things would go wrong. Like you said, if I voice my crazy idea, someone's gonna tell me, wait a second, here's what's gonna happen if you do that.
Yeah. And that's why we have those, like the U.S. Constitution in general, which I'm learning more about myself, you know what I mean? But like there are reasons why we value freedom of speech. And it's exactly that point where it's like, hey, it's okay that we disagree on things, but what we, like, no one knows what's right, you know what I mean? But we know that censoring any views, whether we think they're good or bad, is not the way to go. Because throughout history, and if you talk about like, okay, what's the end result of us censoring and being basically authoritarian? It's communism.
Yeah.
Like communism's a real thing. And it actually my first video, which kind of kicked off the entire podcast, which I think I mentioned to you, like my mom was a Vietnamese boat refugee, like literally fled southern Vietnam after the fall of Saigon to communism. Like communism's a fucking nasty, authoritarian, government regime that collapses both society, the economy, and causes widespread suffering. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I think the statistic is like there was over 100 million innocent non-soldiers who died during the 1900s because of communism. Because it collapses your economy after 20 years, let's say. So it's not something you see tomorrow. It's like, hey, those views we don't like, let's censor those. Okay, those views we don't like, let's censor those. Until people get so accustomed to that no one's able to speak the same language. People are super divided. I mean, in my conspiracy, I think that's happening right now in our society. And, there's a lot of college students advocating for communism, which is crazy because of the... Specifically, yeah. Where they, a lot of these kids I think don't know what they're talking about, but it's like it's like a counterculture spirit where it's like, F the government, F this stuff. We need to, there's people suffering. We need to, and there's, like injustices in our society. We need to tear down the institution. We need to radically change how the government works. We need to do this. It's a common thing. Like it happened in the Soviet Union, happened in Ethiopia, happened in China. And in the Soviet Union and China, there was, again, close to 100 million deaths because slowly destroying your economy, eventually it's way too expensive to get food. Eventually we can't get gasoline.
Yeah.
I mean, Venezuela is going through that right now, where they adopted basically socialism about 20 years ago. Everyone was saying that's not a good idea. Now their people are like literally starving and fleeing their countries and like all this crazy stuff. But part of why I started the podcast is because there's college students out there who believe in communism, which I think is a bad idea. I fortunately didn't fall prey to that ideology because my mom came from an experience of communism. So I just, not that she's a communist expert, but like her story is real.
Yeah, you've heard the story.
Yeah, it's freaking crazy. You know what I mean? So I feel fortunate to have, one, had a mother like her, first of all, but two, that she, values living in America. There's tons of immigrants from all around the world who risk their lives to come to America for a good reason. Yeah. We have a fucking nice society. So I kind of feel like it's my responsibility now that I have that knowledge of communism to spread the word like, hey, this thing is fucking real. And we're making some of the same mistakes that those guys did. Follow it 20 years down the road. Totally. Widespread suffering. You know what I mean?
Yeah, this emphasizes my care for education, I think. Because, honestly, I don't know a lot about what we're talking about. I'm hearing things that make sense.
Well, you don't want people to suffer. That's the start.
Yeah. And, I think it's education, and it's interesting because with our exposure to the internet, period, and everything that's available, a lot of people will feel like they know. They'll feel very educated. They'll feel like, well, I got this information. And maybe it was from a credible source, but there's just more to that picture. So these kids that are like, these people are suffering, we need to do something about it. There's more to the picture, and there's more to the problem, and there's more to the solution, right? That it's not just there's one problem and we have this solution, but there's probably 10 other problems that are associated with that. More problems you would cause if you just fixed one piece of it, and depending how you went about fixing it, right? Like there's so many bigger pieces to it, and that's all about education. And what do we call it when the news is fake? Fake news.
Yeah.
Or just totally, like false news or
misinformation.
Misinformation that feels
propaganda.
Maybe and maybe one piece of it is real, but that's just not everything you need to know in order to make a standpoint on it, right? And that's hard for me to even have strong opinions on a lot of political things, because I'm like, there's so much more I need to know before I'm going to stand firmly on one piece of it, right?
Oh, that's absolutely true. And like the thing is, whether we look at like communist history or even a lot of the crazy stuff happening now, there's a guy called James Lindsay who, in my opinion, is like the leading expert on combating Marxism, which is like the philosophy behind communism. It's like a whole worldview, right? That kind of like makes people think communism is a good idea. But he explains how a lot of communist propaganda, he calls it like a contrived idea. So it's basically like you take something that's true, some sort of like, oh, we had, X amount of whatever last year. Mm-hmm. Take something that's true and then pair it with something that's false. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So like the example that he uses is like, whatever people's views on like climate change are, some nefarious forces who really want to advocate for more climate change policies, they'll show a graph where it's like, hey, look, like, last year was like a little bit warmer than this year. Like, what's going on? Mm-hmm. It's like, hey, that data is technically true, but if we look at the past 100 years, nothing's changed. Like, it's not like things have gotten hotter or colder, or, you know what I mean? So it's all about context. But if you are trying to push propaganda, whoever you are, you're going to take something that's true because people will resonate with it or agree with it, and then you'll spin it in some trickery way to get people to be like, oh yeah, no, I want to censor that trans article online. You know what I mean? Where it's like, oh wait, trans people are, being ousted in society, which is true in some areas, but does that mean we need to tear down freedom of speech? That's where we're making that jump where, I don't know, I've had a lot of interesting conversations since like creating the podcast, but kind of tied into like cancel culture. How does that fit with communism? Like, why the F am I even doing this? What do I know? What don't I know? Yeah. So it's interesting. It really is. But I think to your point, like, you don't want to censor any views. Even the communists, don't censor them. Like, we want to hear what the F they're saying and all that stuff. And like, we want to be able to have open dialogue, to trade ideas and challenge our own ideas and come up with our own conclusions on our own. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You know what? This just popped into my head because this is like very political. And I don't, like, I pretty much hands off when it comes to politics, but with the censorship thing, something I'm passionate about, I guess, would be like honesty and reality. And I've said before, like, when you're trying to deceive somebody, you're trying to like work their reality and only show them like, oh, this is what's real, even though there's a whole other piece of the reality. Mm-hmm. So this isn't reality now because you don't have the full picture. In regards to like being honest with people and being real and coming authentically with who you are and whatever information is available. Maybe I do care about politics because that's what censorship might be.
Yeah, I mean,
that makes sense if I said that well.
No, it totally does. And what I've learned is like, even if again people disagree with me like politically, a lot of us agree on the same stuff. You know what I mean? Like a lot of us do agree that
the root of it.
Exactly, yeah. And again, it's like we can have totally different political views, but we want one another to have the right to say it. Mm-hmm. We want, we don't want censorship. Like a lot of that's, we want a better economy. We want less crime. We want our kids to be better educated, not worse. Like most of us agree on that stuff. And I think with like, misinformation, or there's a lot of nefarious forces in like the media and social media that I think like, almost want people to be divided because that's how they build momentum. That's how these, for example, like the climate change activists, I think like they build a lot of momentum because people are like, this guy's crazy. Look, this chart's real. And he said it wasn't, like, you know what I mean? So it's like, exactly, like they almost like, it's another communist thing where like they build momentum on division. If they can find a point of conflict that society is kind of bent on, they're going to totally capitalize on that and fucking sow division.
That's
it's crazy.
Like social media. That's
absolutely.
Because you see something that you haven't seen before that's kind of crazy or whatever, views.
Yeah, and we have these echo chambers, which is sad too, because like a lot of the kids who get into like the trans thing, a lot of them, on social media, they're just surrounded by all these people who are like, yeah, do it. And then like maybe they all of a sudden the AI offers them a video that's more critical of the transgender ideology, and they're like, I don't like that, So don't show me any more content like that. Yeah. So and it happens on both sides. Like people who are like, let's say like really, really conservative, those individuals can also fall prey to confirmation bias, where it's like, I only want this, like, I don't care about that. Yeah. So social media has absolutely accelerated like this like social decay that we have, but it's because. And it's really like, it's people, I mean, technically the younger generation, like our generation, a little bit younger, they're told what to think, not how to think. And when you're told what to think and not how to think, all of a sudden you're jumping to these like insane conclusions and you're like, well, no, that sounds like the morally superior decision. So I'm going to go with that one. Not realizing like, wait, so now you're advocating that we censor XYZ. Like, so it's a whole crazy mess, but Communist 101, the best way out of it is human interaction and dialogue and challenging our views. And like, because again, like if you're on social media, you think the world's insanely divided, yet we sit down in person and we agree on almost everything, you know what I mean? So it's just, it's important that we have conversations. That's why I'm doing the podcast. And hopefully in parallel, we can teach kids to get their shit together.
Yeah, totally. I love it. I think conversations are valuable too.
Yeah.
And you go online and it's a whole world full of a bunch of everything.
Yeah, radical behavior, yeah.
And it feels like sometimes that's like its own little reality. But when you come and you like put that aside and you're with somebody and you can dig into the conversation, suddenly things like click back into perspective of what reality really is.
Yeah.
And you're right, that we can agree on a lot. I mean, I could sit with someone else and we could argue like crazy and maybe we disagree on a lot, but I bet you'd still be right in that like common ground of some sort of basis, that deeper level. Maybe the execution might look differently, but what we care about at the end of the day, it's in that conversation.
Damn, I love that. I love that we're able to talk about this too, because I want to talk about it more. And like when I talk to people, like they like talking about it, or at least they're like interested in it. You know what I mean? So, but I mean, like I think it's a good spot to wrap up. Like, appreciate your time. Any like final words for my audience and anything like that?
I don't think I have anything. I think a theme in my year, well, it's a new year, but a theme in my past year, and even with this. Like the end of this conversation too has been listening. Yeah. And like being open to just hear outside of yourself what's going on with other people.
It's a sign of maturity. So I have high hopes for the next 5 to 10 years for you. I mean, we'll still know each other. We'll still, bounce off of bounce ideas off each other and all that type of stuff. So
I love it.
Yeah, appreciate you contributing. Hopefully you got something out of it too.
Yeah, no, this has been fun. Thanks for having me.
Sweet. Thank you.